Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, I'm your host, Ayman Makarim. Today, December 8th, 2024, is a momentous day. The regime of Bashar al-Assad, the Assad dynasty, has come to an end. After 13 years of revolutionary struggle, the Syrian people have emerged victorious. I can't believe I'm saying these words, because only 10 days ago, it seemed an impossibility. Only 2 days ago, it felt like a dream. But it's become a reality, and I have so many thoughts and so many feelings to share, and so many fears, of course, and worries, and analyses. But for now, for today's episode, I'm going to keep it on to reflections as someone who has not just followed, but found myself intimately tied to this revolution since its beginning, since its onset, and found myself in conversation and work with Syrians. And so, I don't know, I'm gonna, as a Lebanese, for example, whose history is very much so tied with that and the Syrian people, we speak the exact same, dialect of the same language. Whatever. I've got a lot to share, and I'm gonna do that. Before I do, if you aren't a member of the Patreon, become a member of the Patreon today. What are you doing listening to this podcast and not being a member of the Patreon? If you can afford it. That's my little advertisement. So, because I just need to get into this. Holy shit. Holy shit. I recorded an episode on the 5th of December. And I sort of sat on it for a day or two because we had released some other episodes of the other podcasts, and I just wanted to not flood the feed. And it's kind of irrelevant. Or, you know what I mean? I'm recording this and I'm going to release it right away. But that episode, maybe I'll release it because it's kind of funny how fucking quickly things developed. In that episode, I think the opposition in the north had only reached Hama. And I was talking about there's some weird thing happening in the south, some reports of like uprisings in the south, but we don't know much about that. That same day, those forces unite. They form the Southern Front. Dara, Quneitra, and Swaida unite and essentially liberate themselves, liberate their own prisons and their own army headquarters and their own police headquarters, and kick out the regime and unite and begin opening essentially a Southern Front and start heading towards Damascus. And the next day, liberated Daraya, which was the kind of birthplace of the revolution. So people are celebrating, obviously. Today was an incredibly, incredibly powerful day after 13 years of struggle that Syrians have this major, major victory. This is the very first revolutionary demand of the Syrian revolution. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. The people want the overthrow of the regime, and they have done that. They have done that through 13 years of resistance, through setbacks and counter-revolutionary war, and massacres, and displacement, and ridicule, and erasure, and humiliation, and imprisonment, and it's that part is over. I can't believe it. It's been, for the last few days, just this impossibility that's on the tip of all of our tongues, and it's fucking happened. A friend of mine reminded me that I had written several poems in like the mid-2010s about, literally about killing Bashar al-Assad, I went back to my old computer and I was looking for it, and I couldn't find it, but I rediscovered that Syria was the focus of my poetry at the time. Um, I mean, I don't know how this will sound, but it was the Gaza of our day, um, which is why, so much of the footage kind of gets confused sometimes. But it was horrendous. It was horrible. And, I mean, it remained horrible. It remains horrible. Some of the things we're seeing now of the release of these prisoners, and we're seeing the insides of these prisons for the very first time, most notoriously Sednaya. Again, 3-4 days ago, I was just sort of fantasizing for a moment, entertaining the thought. Imagine if they liberate Sednaya, and I would cry. I cried. And now it's happened. And we're seeing these dungeons and these people who are just reduced, There's a footage of a man who cannot speak because he may have forgotten. He may be so tortured. But anyway, the liberation of prisons is another core demand of the revolution, right? And I think it's like a core demand of any proper revolution, because these prisons are illegitimate. These are the regime's prisons. And I don't know, like most of these people are political prisoners. Anyone who is just a violent, antisocial, whatever, had a very good place in the government, had a very comfortable position in the army or in the security forces, but they're not languishing in these prisons. In Sednaya, there are these children. They're just so young, in one of the most notorious just gulags. And at the moment, there is still a search for people within the Sednaya prison complex. They entered into the command center room, and so they have all this footage, or live camera CCTVs, and they can see certain cells that they have not entered yet and opened up and freed the people in it, because they don't know how to find those places. Can you imagine this multi-layered dungeon, which for 10, 15, for 20 years was the place where people are disappeared? Just the word. I really don't know how to communicate to people for whom, I don't know, maybe some of this is a bit new. And I will say very affirmatively, if you do not know the impact of the word Sednayo, what that means, then I think you need to take a little bit of a step back if you have any analysis. I've definitely noticed a lot of people jumping the boat, or jumping quickly and having certain analysis. Fucking so many people are talking to me about Libya, and it's I've never heard you talk about Libya. I don't think you actually know anything about Libya, but this seems like the new tanky talking point that's widely circulating, because essentially it's oh yeah, well, good that he's gone, but what's next? And I find that just honestly a bit condescending, actually very racist. When Syrians are celebrating for the very first time after having struggled and struggled against and struggled under this regime for so long, for whom its overthrow at a certain point just seemed impossible. But also that if that's the first focus, then we're not centering Syrians, even in this moment of overthrow, which is definitely something that I have noticed that Syrians have commented on for a decade. The disrespect that Syrians have and face, wherein even in this moment, it's instantly, oh, but what happens next? Yeah, give them a second. But regardless, there is a lot of attempts to salvage some of these shit narratives on Syria that erase Syrians and the Syrian revolution. And a part of that is just, I don't know, doing these not comparative examples. Syria is not Libya. It's a whole ass other country. I understand the potential in comparative examples. This is not a comparative example. But again, the actual narratives that have always been there comes out there because what's implied there is that this is a Western intervention to overthrow a dictator, and that's it. But it's not. It's just not. Um, like Gaddafi was literally, I think, initially like bombed by a NATO jet. There was a revolution at the time. There were these uprisings. There were local rebels, but it was also just like a few months, not this 13-year long struggle with this huge country that's just a different fucking country with millions of people with a complete different culture. I hate it. I hate it. I hate the flattening of our societies and our struggles. And it's so racist, and it is like core Orientalism to think that you can just very quickly whip up rhetorically, like, oh, look at Libya, look at Iraq. Again, Iraq was a US direct intervention. There was no revolution at the time. There was no uprising. But anyway, whatever. Sorry, I got into that quite quickly because that's just mixed in with it. But I don't want to do that here. Not now. Not yet. I just want to have a second to just, I don't know, accept this with all of you. To express this. To, Jesus, it's actually fucking happened. I honestly cannot, it does not go into my brain. So much has changed in the last year, but I don't know. The Assad regime is over. There are these jokes actually that I've heard from Syrians, like a part of the sort of really dark Syrian humor is the kind of like inevitable continuation of this dynasty. It's a joke between a lot of Arab people under these regimes. But yeah, I mean, very specifically for me, I had spent the last 2 months now doing research on Arab nationalism, which was the sort of like part of the founding ideology of the Ba'ath Party, which is what Hafiz al-Assad was all about. And then when he took over, and then Bashar. And yeah, it's been a very long, shitty history. And I wish the Syrian people all the best. And I think now there are some really legitimate fears from a lot of people. And those are legitimate. I don't want to be dismissive. I'm not dismissive at all, of like Kurdish fears, Armenian minority fears, even Sunni fears. I mean, because these groups do clamp down on quite a lot of like their own and what is a good Sunni, you know what I mean? But so obviously, I am very suspicious of HTS. I am very curious about, again, Syria is a huge country, and what we'd seen, especially in the last 3 or 4 days, is this sort of organic uprising from the south of the country, which had revolutionary momentum, was crushed, faced incredible amounts of counter revolutionary repression. And so seeing what was happening with HTS in the north, seeing those successes, seeing Homs fall, Hama fall, or rather, sorry, Halab and then Homs, and then like at the outskirts of Homs, were inspired to, in Suwaida, for example, Suwaida was never put under the boot of the Assad regime in the same way that the others were. That, as in, like, literally, there was no, of these massacres, there was like a few. A notable example is when the regime sent ISIS essentially to do this horrible massacre like 6, 7 years ago. But anyway, they've been protesting straight up every day for the last year in Suwaida, the Druze kind of semi-autonomous, sort of de facto semi-autonomous zone in the southeast. Um, yeah, these are like actual just full-on remnants of the revolution that had been suppressed and rose up and liberated their own cities. And, so anything moving forward, I think, I mean, HTS has been very, very explicit about this for, in all of the speeches and all of the whatever declarations, whenever they're entering cities, there's a lot of attempts at doing governance, let's say, as in, I don't know, again, heavy bit of salt or heavy dose of sugar with all of this. Um, and not saying they have become, libertarian, anarchist, communist, whatever. We know their like founding ideologies and their base, and how these sort of structures work and what happens when resistance groups become sort of successful, topple a regime, and then have ambitions of their own to govern, which has been kind of a failure, or a disaster rather. But yeah, Syria is huge, and I think there are going to be attempts at doing some reconciliation, some power sharing thing, um, between different factions within whatever. Um, if nothing else, at the very first basis, and Syrians are saying this and have been saying this all along, if anything is to happen, if anything is to change, the very first thing that needed to happen was Bashar al-Assad had to go. I can't believe this is actually happening. For years, it just sounded like this utopic ideal when I would say to people that there will never be peace in Syria, that people will not return, that there will be no conclusion to the so-called conflict, while Bashar al-Assad is still in power. And that's not just me and my analysis. Syrians will not go back. There will not be a country to speak of. And the reactions of people, Syrians specifically, has really demonstrated that. The joy at the fact that people are like, wait, I'm no longer a refugee, am I? I'm just a Syrian now. And I don't know, I've got a lot of friends who are, looking at tickets to go to Damascus next year. And I don't know. It's really a lot. It's really a lot. And I have been a bit frustrated at some of the takes I'm seeing. And I will do an episode at some point about something I've described. I'm sure there's a actual analysis that already exists of like the take industry. Because I've noticed some of these people, favorite thing that's happened within this context is the rats that are jumping ship. But there are some rats that are going down with the ship. Vishay Prishnad, for example, comes out and says there is no Syrian revolution. It's all a Western hoax. Rania Masri, who, again, these two are like smarter, They tend not to say these intense things, but in this moment of crisis, they have fully revealed themselves. And so, Rania Masri, who is very good friends with Rania Khalid, both of them are Assadist stooges, but Masri is usually a bit smarter. And what she said is, if you are happy right now, you are a Zionist or an imperialist, or you have just become so deluded with Zionist propaganda. Well, girl, there are Ghazans, so many of them, who are celebrating with the Syrian people right now. There are Ghazans who are surviving genocide in this very moment by the Zionists, who you claim to stand in solidarity with, who are literally at the center of whatever you think you're doing. And they're standing with the Syrian people and are happy and are cloaking themselves in the Free Syrian flag. Are they Zionists? Is that what you're saying, Rania Masri? I noticed that you deleted the tweet. Very good of you, but we saw it. We know what you're all about. And Rania Khalid did a very interesting thing where she was a rat who was jumping ship. And she changed her tone last minute to be like, oh, wait, there was a Syrian revolution. Girl, we know you knew that. We saw your tweets from 2013, from 2014. We know you have a heart. But you have killed that heart 1,000 times by 1,000,000 rubles and whatever fucking Venezuelan liras you were getting paid when you were working for Telesur. And you have just been lying. I don't know what's worse. A propagandist who believes their propaganda or one who doesn't. So I just don't care about these people that much. I find myself talking about it because I realize that there's a lot of people at the moment who are kind of swept between them, who have been following these people. And this is why I tell people all the time, do not follow these people. I don't care if they say good things about Palestine. There is going to be a moment wherein, it's a little bit more complicated, and you will be very confused by what they're saying, because the narrative they have is bullshit. The analysis, there is no analysis. It is just takes. And I noticed that there's a big difference between those making takes and those who have been working and discussing and developing and engaging with the Syrian revolution in, properly, fully. Who the fuck is Saif Sheikh Jarrah now? Like, sorry, I hate even that he has the word, Sheikh Jarrah in his name. But who is he? Who is he? You know what I mean? Like, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, I don't know, have you ever seen these like headlines where it's like Ariana Grande speaks out about Palestine? I don't give a fuck. Like, why is that important? But especially on Twitter and on social media, every tweet technically, um, all tweets are equal essentially. And so a tweet from Obama is the same. It's a tweet from a Twitter account, same as my tweet from my Twitter account. But, Obama has a certain weight. He can write a tweet and it literally, kills someone, a family, or whatever, does imperialist propaganda that like has manifest, and as opposed to mine, who reaches my like 10, queer nerd friends. Anyway, but so yeah, I noticed like, I don't know, some of these people are writing things and people are taking them seriously, and it's like, who is this person really to be talking about this? I'm not talking expertise. I'm not saying they have to have degrees. I'm an advocate of the kind of amateur whatever, but I don't know, like compared to when then I see a tweet from someone who I know has written extensively for years, are Lebanese, are Syrian, have contacts with whatever. Again, I think it's so important that like, I think a lot of people don't talk to Syrians. So it's harder to center Syrians. At the moment, every Syrian I know is celebrating. And so I find it very bizarre when then I go on Twitter or Instagram and there's all this analysis. And it's like, or, fears that are disconnected from, to me, in my mind, the legitimate fears of minorities in Syria, for instance, or for Syrians themselves. It's fears for other groups. It's fears for the region. It's fears for Lebanon. It's fears for Palestine. And any quote unquote fears of the Syrian themselves, it's ridiculous. It's completely invalid, because it's that weird thing of being worried for a people who they themselves are not worried. And what's implied there is how naive. How naive of these people to be celebrating. Don't they know that they have just overthrown the last remnants of stability in the region? Ugh, Syrians, they don't even know that all of this is Western-backed propaganda, bullshit, whatever. I don't know, I can't believe anybody is actually lecturing Syrians about naivete, about imperialism, about intervention. Syrians know. Syrians have agency. Syrians have seen so many groups, so many people abandon them. They've been betrayed by so many people. And up until like 2 weeks ago, had kind of lost hope. Up until like 8 years ago. To me, something that's incredible is the fucking amount of Syrian joy that I'm seeing, which I haven't seen in years. It's been really fucking hard for like 10 years. I don't know. I really hope that a lot of people listening kind of feel that. Because I don't know what more people need just to kind of experience this. I don't know how to explain this. seeing prisons being liberated in itself is a massive, massive victory. It is soul moving. It is the thing of dreams manifest. And I think that needs to be centered a little bit, or rather Syrians themselves in general and their experience of things, which I see as absent in a lot of these discourses. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to say. We're going to be doing a lot in the Fire These Times and from the periphery. God, there are actually some people. This has been so beautiful. I've been crying so much the last few days. Like sometimes tears of joy. It's incredible. But I have friends and people online who are kind of unmasking themselves as well. Because for the longest times they've been running with like using pseudonyms and never showing their face. And there's that incredible thing of, you've spent so long getting to know somebody and you do know them, it's that person. But then there's something that's changed and they're like, actually, now I can tell you my real name. I've been crying so much the last few days, I can't explain it. And it's a moment that's so powerful, and there are so many people for whom I'm just so grateful for all of their struggle, for, I don't know, their camaraderie. I don't know, something has changed for sure. Not just with Assad leaving, but I think, yeah. I don't know, I've got a lot for sure, and I don't know if I've covered everything, but I don't care. It's fine. I just wanted to do something spontaneous, get my thoughts out there, share this all with you. And yeah, I wish you all the best. And I wish this for all oppressed people across the world, that all prisons are liberated, that all these regimes collapse, that, then we can finally start really manifesting the work that we need to do, the building of strong communities, the development of our own kind of economies outside of capitalism, and I don't know, just fucking, sorry, I'm going kind of blank because it's getting to that point. God. Yes, okay, so thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of Politically Depressed. A very special episode. And yeah, this is all going to be a bit messy, but it's fine. That's how things go sometimes. If you want to support this podcast, patreon.com, become a member. If you don't want to do membership for, monthly membership, there's the tip jar below for one-time donations. And yeah. So I'll see you all next time.